You've got blank lines there that don't exist in the expected output.
Oh, okay.
So that probably have E and D also need to be removed.
This is the count.
All right, your last chance to answer the exciting poll question.
Yeah.
All right, it's looking like quite a few of you have finished the project. That's good. Staying on top of this stuff. Someone's a little bit confused. That's okay. All right. So one thing I wanted to say about the project that you may not be aware of if you're not familiar with Blackboard is, I'll leave this just for, since I have a mismatch between submissions and attendees, I'll leave that poll up and let everyone chime in who's here. When you, let me see here, projects. All right, one thing is when you go to submit this, the link that takes you to this page for submitting the project, two things. One, if it's before the deadline, well, let me talk about deadlines first of all. In the distant past, when I had set a deadline, I would inevitably get somewhere between 2 and 5 emails about, variations of the dog ate my computer, or the power went out, or I had network trouble, or something like that. So I generally have a pretty big lag time between when it's due and when submission is cut off. So this one is due at 11 o'clock tonight, but let me bring the prior page up. You normally have the description here and then the submission link. The submission link actually doesn't disappear for another 8 hours or something like that. It's like 8 or 9 the following morning when this finally disappears. So you've got many, many hours of lag time, and I have that to eliminate those issues of I was just about to turn it in and something went wrong. It Blackboard may say that it's submitted quote late. I don't look at any of that stuff. Either it's submitted or it isn't. Okay. So if you submit it and Blackboard says it's late, don't worry about that. Another thing is that I believe I have it configured for all of them, is that when you go to submit something, I should have unlimited submissions, which means you can submit the thing as many times as you want. The only thing that is graded is the most recent one you submitted. So if you realize after the fact you made a mistake and you go fix it and resubmit, then everything's cool. If I do have some sort of assignment where it's clearly not due yet, and yet it won't let you submit a second time or a third time, let me know. That's something I have to, it assumes only a single submission unless I change the setting, and it's entirely possible there's some assignment or project out there where it's either gotten reset or I've forgotten to set it. So if there's anything you can't resubmit to, let me know. They should be, I'm hoping, all fixed by now. The final thing is on this submission link, there's a little button here to view rubric. This is only for the projects, and this is what you're graded on. So you'll want to check this. Even if you submit it, I have a feeling many of you are going to have not checked this and will want to resubmit the assignment because there are, it's pretty straightforward. There are a couple hidden items that you may not necessarily be familiar with. So some pretty basic stuff. Does the program compile? Does it run according to the specifications? This is the one right here. I'd like you to put a comment at the top of your program that includes your name and the project number. So if you haven't seen this rubric, then add that to your code and resubmit it. This is another one. So it's in this rubric, and I don't know if it's in one of the videos or not. I don't believe I've talked about it in class. But let me quit out of this. Oh, let me see if I can find some code here. All right, so this is some of my code actually, and the content of the code isn't that important. What's more important is that it's possible, Vim tries to help you with indenting and stuff, but you can easily get kind of out of whack with indenting. So I ask before you turn in your code that you do, let me screw up all this code. There, now everything should be flush against the left edge. If I do this little recipe here, GG equals G, GG, actually all GG does is it immediately takes you to the very top of your file. Equals means reformat the code. And then the next thing it wants is a direction. So for example, a direction we're all familiar with is J. There, I just reformatted, I think, my current line and the line below it, which end up being flush left anyway, so that doesn't do anything. So that's why I don't say GG equals J. Where do you think uppercase G takes you? Yeah, so if I'm just hanging out anywhere in the document, GG will always take me to the top, and uppercase G will always take me to the bottom. So what I'm doing is get to the top of your document, reformat all the way to the bottom of the file. So equals uppercase G, and there isn't anything to see on the top screen, but as I go down you can see some of this stuff's being indented now. Okay. So be sure and do that to your code. The reason for me to make it a grading item primarily is not because I'm anal about the format of your code, because by golly, I can do that myself to your code, right? And then I'm happy. The reason's more to make you aware of it, that you can and should make your code look a little bit nicer. In the long run, it makes your code far more readable. That's about it. Let me see. So there are a few items here. I think all the rest of it you can't help but have gotten full credit for by virtue of completing the project. So to generalize, any project you submit in the course, be sure in that submission link to check out the rubric. Yeah?
It's not going to be like the turn it in. It doesn't have to be exactly.
It is not like turn it in. So a human will grade the projects. Any other questions? Okay. I've got one of these anonymous questions here. Is it the same to compile a program? Yeah, so that's a good question. I don't have a firm answer for you, so let me give you the general answer. When I'm sitting here at a prompt and I type ls, well, let me go back. When you run your programs, you're doing something like that, if you go with the default name that the compiler gives, right? And you're just telling, and this prompt I would say is the shell. This is actually a program that's running. The program is designed to take your input and respond to it. So in this case, it takes my input and it'll look in the current, it'll look in the current directory for a program called a.out and it'll execute it. When you do this, it's going to look, there are some predefined areas where it can find programs. It'll look in one of those predefined areas for a program called ls. And ls actually, this was written by a human. It isn't any magical command. It was someone probably wrote it in C or C++. They had a main function. They pound included some stuff. And they wrote the code that allows you to get a listing of items in your directory. When I type clear to clear the screen, same thing, CD. All of these are just programs that people wrote. And that's all you're doing is you're running these little simple programs. Make directory, right? That's a program that someone wrote. So when you type g++ blank.cpp, someone wrote a program and named it g++. Right, and it just happens to be a very complex program to be sure, but it's one that takes that human readable text file input and it converts it into machine runnable code. Now, you're not required to call your programs a.out. You can name them whatever you want. And even if the compiler had called it a.out, you could always rename a.out to be my cool program, right? You can call it whatever you want. So the answer to this question then takes on a slightly different meaning. Is it the same to compile a program as g++, blank.cpp, and C++? And the answer to that question is, well, if they have a compiler out there or a quote program out there called C++, then yeah, you can do that. It'll all depend on the platform you're on. Is it on OS 10? It is on OS 10. Is it on Jaguar? It is on Jaguar as well. Let's see. And I couldn't tell you offhand. They look like they are different. I can't tell you offhand how they're different. Ah, look at that. That's funny. They aren't different at all. So This is, I did a directory listing, which we're familiar with. This is an option you can provide, which gets a what's called a long listing. That's why, therefore, the L. And what it is I'm getting a listing of. Or you could do it on every file. If I just said ls-l and hit enter, it would give me a long listing of every file in my current directory. A lot of this stuff you get later on in the program. It's not important. Some of it's obvious. This is the last time that program was modified. And this is saying that user bin C++ is not its own file. It's just a little link that is referring to this file here, etc alternative C++. And then what I did is I did a long listing on etc alternative C++, and it's telling me that that is also not its own thing, but a link to a different program, which is user bin G++. Right? So it turns out on Jaguar that C++ and G++ are exactly the same thing. Is it that way all the time? I have not the slightest idea. It all depends. It may be totally different in Windows. Windows may not have G++ nor C++. The reason why the letter G for the G++, and that's because Linux as an operating system is a free operating system, freely available for everyone to use. The source code is completely available. You can look at the source code to the entire operating system. And a lot of it bundled with it, the ls, the G++, the make directory, and about 10,000 other things, are all a suite of freely available tools called the GNU tools, where GNU means GNU's not Unix. Right. So it's a self-referencing acronym. And so that's why you see the G here and there, is it's part of this GNU tool suite, which you don't need to know for anything other than to be able to not lay awake wondering about that tonight. All right, so I think we've covered that. I'm going to remove that then. I need to shrink this down. Anyone have any other questions? Whoops, wrong one. Yes?
How do you get a program to stop running?
Excellent question, and that becomes very relevant today. How do you stop a program from running? Let's create one of those programs, shall we? All right, so we'll say run away. Let's say while int counter equals 0, while counter is less than 10, I want to see out. Ooh, she's a little runaway. I don't remember who does that song. Is that like Aerosmith? I don't remember. I'm just reciting the lyrics. I didn't write the song. Don't get mad at me. All right, so now what's going to happen, what I would normally do is I'd do something like counter plus plus to add 1 to counter, and it would do this 10 times. But I've got a bug in my program, and I forgot to change counter. So that means 100% of the time, forever, counter is going to be less than 10, and this is what I would call a runaway process. We can compile it, and then let me go ahead and be a proper and put that in. I run it, and it goes on forever. The way to get out of a runaway program is to hold down Control and hit C. That'll break out. Okay. Control C. Any other questions? Yeah.
What was that /n that you put in there?
Yeah, that's another good question. So when we say I'm going to do this. I'm going to put it in a totally different program. New lines. in Tmux. Hang on, give me just half a second. All right. So here, it's a little bit cramped, but yeah, we can see that, even though it's cramped. Let me move that down. Oops. So what endline is doing is it's merely putting a single character. If I was to say it properly, I would say that endline is putting a new line character into the output stream. And the new line character, if I wanted to literally represent that, is a \n. Why the backslash? Because if I don't have it, it's going to put a letter N into the output stream. All right. So that's what that is. Endline is essentially the same. There are some real minor differences, but we ain't going to see them in this class. Any other questions? Okay. Then what I want to do with the rest of the morning is jump into the assignments. And we are on what are we, assignment 7? Nope, assignment 8. Using loops. All right, this is what I want to do with the remainder of the class as an activity. This activity is not due until Saturday at the end of the day, around 11 at night. And then, as I've already mentioned previously, if you're partying hard on Saturday and you get home at 3 in the morning, you got a good 5 hours to get this done. All right? So what am I asking you to do? You can. This is another one of those assignments where I encourage you to get together with someone or someones and work on it together. However, you all are responsible for submitting it individually. I've got 3 different tasks here. So let me just look at the first task. Ask a user how many times they want the computer to print high. So you say, how many times do you want to print high? And you ask for a number, and you type in 8, and then you print high that many times. And I'm going to ignore the question to ponder for a moment. What you need to do is you have to write 3 loops to do that. You have to ask the user how many times they want to print high and print high that many times using a while loop, using a do while loop, and using a for loop. Then there's a second task. You have to print a countdown from 10 to 1 and then print the word liftoff. You have to do that with a while loop. You have to do that with a do while loop and do that with a for loop. All right, and then the same thing with the third one. Ask the user for a name. Keep asking them, give me a name, give me a name, give me a name. As soon as they say Barney, you can go ahead and stop. With a for loop, with a while loop, with a do while loop. Now, I put in this. I actually pasted this in early this morning because I always get questions, well, do I create 9 different programs? No, I kind of want it the way you see it here, just one big program that exercises all the basically 9 loops, each of the 3 different loops for the 3 different tasks. Okay. At this stage, I would say one of the biggest mistakes you can make is to crank out 200 lines of code before you exit your editor. Right? Pick the easiest one, write 1 loop for it, get out of your editor, compile it, run it, make sure it's working the way you think it should work. Now go on to the next loop, get the next loop working, get out of your editor, compile it, make sure it's working. Okay, you need to do this little chunks of code at a time with each iteration. That way, if something goes wrong, you know it has to be in the 3 to 5 lines that you just added. All right. So with that, I will be here to answer questions and walk around and make you a little nervous. Otherwise, that's it.